Emma Martinez woke up before the sun came up that Tuesday morning in London. She had been waiting for this day for 3 whole months. Today was the day she would finally see the famous palace guards at Buckingham Palace. The 7-year-old girl from Madrid, Spain, had dreamed about this moment since her teacher showed pictures of the red-coated soldiers in her English class. Emma's mother, Maria, was already awake and making breakfast in their small hotel room. They had traveled from Spain just for this special trip. Maria had worked extra hours at the hospital where she was a nurse to save money for the plane tickets and hotel. Emma's father, Carlos, had taken time off from his job at the car factory. This was their first family vacation outside of Spain. "Are you ready to see the palace, mi amor?" Maria asked her daughter in Spanish, then quickly switched to English. They had been practicing English words together for weeks. Emma wanted to be able to understand everything when they visited London. Emma jumped out of bed and ran to the window. The London streets were already busy with people walking to work. Red buses drove by, just like in the pictures she had seen. Everything looked different from her home in Madrid. The buildings were older and the sky was gray with clouds. "Mama, will the guards really not move at all?" Emma asked. She had read online that the palace guards were famous for standing very still, even when tourists tried to make them laugh or smile. "That's what people say, Emma. They are very serious soldiers. They protect the king's palace," Maria explained while packing their small backpack with water and snacks. Carlos came out of the bathroom, already dressed in his best shirt. He wanted to look nice for the palace visit. "The guards are called the Queen's Guard, but now they protect the king," he told Emma. "They have been doing this job for hundreds of years." Emma had learned about the British royal family in school. She knew that Queen Elizabeth had died and now her son Charles was the king. The guards still wore the same red uniforms and tall black hats that they had worn for the old queen. After breakfast, the Martinez family took the underground train called the Tube. Emma held tight to her mother's hand as they went down the long escalators. The train was crowded with people going to work and tourists like them. Emma listened to all the different languages being spoken around her. She heard French, German, and many others she didn't recognize. When they came up from the underground at Green Park Station, Emma could hardly contain her excitement. They walked through the park and she could see the palace in the distance. It was much bigger than she had imagined. The building was cream-colored with many windows and the British flag was flying on top. "Look, Papa, there it is." Emma pointed ahead. Her voice was full of wonder. As they got closer, Emma could see crowds of people already gathered around the palace gates. Tourists were taking pictures and talking loudly in many different languages. Some had big cameras hanging around their necks. Others were holding guidebooks and maps. The family joined the crowd behind the black iron gates. Emma was short, so she could barely see over the adults in front of her. Carlos lifted her up onto his shoulders so she could get a better view. That's when Emma saw her first palace guard. He stood perfectly straight next to a small wooden hut called a sentry box. His red jacket had bright gold buttons that shone in the morning light. His black pants had a red stripe down the side. On his feet were shiny black boots that came up to his knees. But what amazed Emma most was his hat. It was made of black fur and was so tall it made the guard look like a giant. The guard held a rifle with a long silver blade on the end. Emma's father had explained that this was called a bayonet. The soldier's face showed no expression at all. He stared straight ahead, not looking at any of the tourists who were taking pictures of him. "He looks like a toy soldier," Emma whispered to her mother. "But he's real," Maria whispered back. "And he's working very hard to protect the palace." Emma watched the guard for several minutes. She noticed that he didn't even blink very often. When people called out to him or waved, he didn't respond at all. It was like he couldn't hear or see them, even though Emma was sure he could. A group of teenage boys tried to make the guard laugh by making funny faces and telling jokes. The guard didn't react at all. His eyes stayed focused on something far in the distance that only he could see. "Why doesn't he talk to anyone?" Emma asked her father. "It's his job to be quiet and watch for danger," Carlos explained. "He can't talk to tourists because he needs to concentrate on keeping everyone safe." Emma felt a little sad for the guard. He looked lonely, standing there all by himself. She wondered if he got tired of standing so still for so long. She wondered if his feet hurt in those big boots. She wondered if he ever wanted to smile at the children who came to see him. The family moved along the fence to see other guards. There were several of them positioned around the palace. Each one stood just as still and serious as the first. Emma noticed that they were all young men, probably not much older than her teenage cousin back in Spain. As they walked, Emma heard a tour guide explaining to a group about the guards. The guide said that the guards worked in shifts and could stand in one place for up to 2 hours without moving. He said they trained for many months to learn how to stay so still and focused. They're not allowed to talk, smile, or react to tourists, the guide said. But they are real soldiers, and if there was real danger, they would protect everyone here. Emma listened carefully to every word. She was learning so much about these special soldiers. She started to feel even more respect for them. They had a very important and difficult job. The morning sun was getting higher, and more tourists were arriving at the palace. The crowd was getting bigger and noisier. Emma noticed that some people were being rude to the guards. They were getting very close and shouting loudly, trying to get a reaction. Some were even touching the guards' uniforms or trying to make them move. This made Emma feel upset. She thought the guards deserved more respect. They were doing their job and protecting everyone, just like her mother protected sick people at the hospital. Emma decided she wanted to show the guards that she appreciated their hard work. But she didn't want to disturb them like the other tourists were doing. She wanted to find a way to say thank you without breaking their concentration or getting them in trouble with their commanders. As the family continued walking around the palace, Emma started thinking about how she could communicate with a guard without speaking. She remembered her cousin Sophia, who was deaf and used sign language to talk. Emma had learned a few signs so she could communicate with Sophia during family visits. Maybe, Emma thought, she could use sign language to say hello and thank you to one of the guards. It would be quiet and respectful, and maybe the guard would understand her message even if he couldn't respond out loud. The idea excited Emma, and she started planning how she would do it. After walking around the palace for about an hour, Emma and her family found a good spot near the main gates where they could see one guard very clearly. This guard was different from the others somehow. Emma couldn't explain why, but something about him caught her attention and wouldn't let go. He was tall and young, probably in his early 20s. His red uniform was perfect, with every button polished and every crease sharp. His black boots reflected the cloudy London sky like mirrors. The tall black fur hat made him look even taller and more impressive than the other guards. But what really fascinated Emma was his eyes. Unlike the other guards who seemed to stare at nothing, this guard's eyes showed something deeper. She could see intelligence and kindness there, even though his face remained completely serious and still. Emma asked her father to lift her up again so she could see better. From Carlos's shoulders, she had a perfect view of the guard. She began to study everything about him with the intense focus that only a 7-year-old child can have when something truly captures their interest. The guard stood in front of a red sentry box that looked like a small house without a door. His rifle rested against his right shoulder, and his left hand hung straight at his side. Emma noticed that he breathed very slowly and calmly. She tried to copy his breathing and found it was harder than it looked to breathe so steadily. "Emma, do you want to see the other guards now?" her mother asked after they had been watching for 15 minutes. "No, Mama. I want to watch this one," Emma replied, not taking her eyes off the soldier. Maria looked at her husband with concern. "Maybe we should move on. There are other things to see." But Carlos was also watching his daughter's fascination with the guard. He remembered being 7 years old and becoming completely absorbed in things that interested him. His own father had always encouraged this kind of focused attention. "Let her watch a little longer," Carlos said quietly to his wife. "She's really learning something here." Emma was indeed learning. She was beginning to understand how much discipline and training it must take to stand so perfectly still for so long. She watched as tourists around her made noise, took flash pictures, and even dropped things near the guard's feet. Through it all, the soldier never moved a muscle or changed his expression. A little boy about Emma's age ran up close to the guard and shouted, "Hello," very loudly. The guard didn't react at all. The boy's parents quickly pulled him back, but Emma saw something in the guard's eyes that the others had missed. For just a split second, she thought she saw a tiny sparkle of amusement, as if the guard had found the little boy's enthusiasm charming, even though he couldn't show it. This made Emma even more curious about the person inside the uniform. She began to imagine what the guard was thinking about as he stood there. Was he thinking about his family back home? Was he counting the minutes until his shift ended? Did he notice the different tourists who came to see him every day? Emma started to notice small details that other people missed. She saw how the guard would sometimes shift his weight very slightly from one foot to the other, so subtly that most people wouldn't notice. She saw how his eyes would sometimes move just a tiny bit to check on the crowd, making sure everyone was safe. He's not like a statue, Emma whispered to herself. He's still a person inside. A group of teenagers approached the guard and started taking selfies with him in the background. They were laughing loudly and making jokes about his hat and uniform. Emma felt angry watching this. She thought they were being disrespectful to someone who was working hard to do an important job. One of the teenagers got very close to the guard and made a silly face right next to his head for a photo. Emma saw the guard's jaw tighten almost invisibly. She realized that even though he couldn't react, the guard could see and hear everything that was happening around him. He was probably frustrated or annoyed by the rude behavior, but his training kept him perfectly still. This made Emma feel even more sympathy for the guard. She thought about how difficult it must be to have people treat you like an object instead of a person, especially when you couldn't defend yourself or respond in any way. "Mama," Emma said, tugging on her mother's sleeve, "I think the guard might be lonely." Maria looked surprised by her daughter's observation. "Why do you think that, mi amor?" "He has to stand there all alone and people take pictures of him like he's not real. But he is real and he can see everything. I think it might make him feel sad sometimes." Carlos was impressed by his daughter's empathy. Even at 7 years old, Emma could understand how another person might feel, even when that person couldn't express their feelings. "What would you like to do about it?" Carlos asked his daughter. Emma thought for a moment. "I want to let him know that someone sees him as a real person, not just a tourist attraction." "But Emma, he can't talk to you," Maria explained. "It's against the rules for him to respond to tourists." Emma remembered her cousin Sophia and the sign language they used to communicate. "Maybe I don't need him to talk back," she said. "Maybe I just need to show him that I understand his job is important and that I respect him." Emma asked her father to put her down. She wanted to think about how to communicate with the guard without getting him in trouble or disturbing his concentration. She had learned a few signs from Sophia, but she wasn't sure if British Sign Language was the same as Spanish Sign Language. Emma pulled out her mother's phone and asked if she could use it to look something up. Maria helped her search for British Sign Language, hello, and British Sign Language, thank you. They found simple videos that showed the hand movements. For these basic phrases, Emma practiced the signs quietly while watching the guard. The sign for hello was simple. She would wave with an open hand. The sign for thank you was more complex. She would touch her fingers to her lips and then move her hand forward toward the person she was thanking. As Emma practiced, she noticed that the guard's shift might be ending soon. She had read on a tourist information board that the guards usually changed positions every 2 hours. She didn't want to miss her chance to communicate with this particular guard who had captured her attention so completely. The crowd around them was getting larger as more tour groups arrived. Emma realized that if she was going to try her silent communication, she needed to do it soon before too many people blocked her view of the guard. She looked up at the soldier one more time, studying his face and trying to gather the courage to attempt her plan. She wanted to show him that at least one person in the crowd saw him as more than just a tourist attraction. She wanted him to know that a little girl from Spain understood, that his job was important and that she respected what he was doing. Emma took a deep breath and decided that she was ready to try her silent signal to the palace guard. Emma's heart was beating fast as she made her decision. She had been watching the palace guard for almost 20 minutes now, and she felt like she understood something about him that the other tourists didn't see. While everyone else treated him like a statue or a photo opportunity, Emma saw him as a real person doing a difficult job. She looked around at the crowd of tourists surrounding them. There were families taking pictures, teenagers making jokes, and tour groups listening to guides explain the history of the palace. Everyone was focused on getting the perfect photo or learning facts about the royal family. But Emma had a different goal. She wanted to make a human connection. "Mama, I'm going to try something," Emma said to her mother in Spanish. Maria looked down at her daughter with curiosity. "What are you going to do, mi amor?" "I'm going to say hello to the guard using sign language. Maybe he will understand that I'm not trying to make fun of him like the other people." Carlos heard what Emma was planning and knelt down to her level. Emma, you know he probably can't respond to you, right? He might not even be allowed to look at you. I know, Papa, but maybe he will see me trying to be respectful, and it will make him feel a little less alone. Emma's parents looked at each other with pride. Their young daughter was showing more maturity and empathy than many of the adults around them. They decided to support her gentle attempt to communicate. Emma positioned herself directly in front of the guard, about 10 feet away from his sentry box. She made sure she was in his line of sight but not close enough to interfere with his duties, or make his supervisors angry. She had noticed that there were other soldiers and police officers watching the area, and she didn't want to cause any trouble. The guard was facing slightly to the left, so Emma moved to make sure he could see her if he wanted to. She took a deep breath and raised her small hands up to chest level, where the guard could easily see them if he chose to look down. Emma started with the sign for hello. She raised her right hand with her palm facing the guard and moved it gently from side to side in a small wave. It wasn't the big, dramatic wave that other tourists used when trying to get the guard's attention. It was quiet and respectful, the kind of greeting you might give to someone in a library or a church. The guard's eyes remained focused straight ahead, looking over Emma's head at something in the distance. His expression didn't change at all. Emma wasn't discouraged. She hadn't expected an immediate response. She knew that the guard had to be very careful about following his orders. Next, Emma tried the sign for thank you. She touched her fingertips to her lips gently, then moved her hand forward toward the guard in a smooth motion. She repeated this sign 3 times, making sure her movements were clear and deliberate. Some of the tourists around Emma started to notice what she was doing. A woman with a large camera pointed it at Emma and started taking pictures. Emma felt uncomfortable with the attention, but she didn't stop her signing. This wasn't about getting attention for herself. This was about communicating with the guard. What is that little girl doing? Emma heard someone ask in English. I think she's using sign language, another person replied. How sweet. She's trying to talk to the guard. More people started watching Emma, and some began taking pictures and videos with their phones. Emma felt nervous with all the attention, but she continued her silent communication. She repeated the signs for hello and thank you several more times, hoping the guard would understand her message. Emma then remembered another sign that Sophia had taught her. It was the sign for friend. She made this sign by hooking her index fingers together, first one way and then the other way. It was a simple gesture that meant she wanted to be friendly. As Emma continued signing, she started speaking quietly in English, even though she knew the guard couldn't respond. Hello, Mr. Guard, thank you for protecting everyone. You are doing a very good job. I think you are very brave to stand so still for so long. Emma's mother was now filming with her phone, not for social media, but because she wanted to remember this special moment when her daughter showed such kindness and respect to a stranger. Emma noticed that the guard's breathing remained steady and calm, but she thought she detected the slightest change in his posture. It was so small that she might have imagined it, but it seemed like his shoulders relaxed just a tiny bit when she started signing. Encouraged by this possible reaction, Emma continued her silent communication. She repeated the basic signs she knew: hello, thank you, and friend. She also tried to sign Spain by pointing to herself and then making the letter S with her hand, hoping to tell the guard where she was from. A group of school children on a field trip had noticed Emma's signing and gathered around to watch. Their teacher, a kind-looking woman with gray hair, approached Emma's parents. Excuse me, is your daughter deaf? The teacher asked in English. No, Maria replied, practicing her English. She learned some sign language to talk with her cousin. Now she wants to say hello to the guard. How wonderful, the teacher said. What a thoughtful child you have. The teacher turned to her students. Children, look at what this young lady is doing. She's using sign language to communicate respectfully with the guard. This is a beautiful example of how we can show kindness and respect to people who are doing important jobs. Emma felt proud that the teacher was using her actions as a good example, but she also felt a little embarrassed by all the attention. She wasn't trying to be a teacher or set an example. She just wanted to let the guard know that someone appreciated him. More tourists were gathering around now, forming a small semicircle behind Emma. Some were taking pictures. Others were just watching with curiosity and admiration. Emma could hear people speaking in different languages, but many seemed to understand what she was trying to do. An elderly man with a British accent said to his wife, "Look at that, Margaret. That little foreign girl has more manners than most of the tourists who come here." Emma continued her signing for several more minutes. She varied between the signs she knew and sometimes just stood quietly with her hands folded, giving the guard a break from her communication attempts. She wanted to be persistent but not annoying. During one of these quiet moments, Emma looked carefully at the guard's face. She studied his eyes, looking for any sign that he had noticed her efforts. His expression remained perfectly neutral, but Emma thought she detected something different in his eyes. They seemed softer somehow, less distant than they had been when she first started watching him. Emma decided to try one more approach. Instead of continuing with the formal sign language, she simply placed her hand over her heart and then extended it toward the guard in a gesture of respect and appreciation. It was a universal sign that needed no translation. It meant, "From my heart to yours." As Emma made this final gesture, something unexpected happened. For just a moment, so brief that most people missed it, the guard's eyes shifted slightly downward. He looked directly at Emma for no more than a second, but in that instant, Emma saw recognition in his eyes. He had seen her. He had understood what she was trying to do. Emma's face lit up with joy, even though the guard immediately returned his gaze to the distance and resumed his perfectly still posture. That 1 second of eye contact was worth all of her patient signing. She had successfully communicated with the palace guard, and he had acknowledged her respectful attempt to connect with him as a human being. The crowd around Emma began to murmur with excitement, though many of them weren't sure what they had just witnessed. But Emma knew. She had made a connection with the guard, and now she waited to see if anything else might happen. Emma stood perfectly still after making her final heart gesture to the guard. She felt a warm feeling in her chest from that brief moment when their eyes had met. Even though it had lasted only a second, she knew the guard had seen her and understood that she was trying to be kind and respectful. The crowd around Emma was getting larger. Word had spread among the tourists that a little girl was using sign language to communicate with one of the palace guards. People were pointing and taking pictures, though most of them didn't fully understand what was happening. Emma's mother, Maria, was standing right behind her daughter, ready to gently pull her away if needed. But she could see that Emma wasn't causing any trouble or disturbing the guard's duties. In fact, Emma was being more respectful than most of the tourists who had been there that morning. "Should we go now, Emma?" Maria asked softly in Spanish. "You've done something very nice." "The guard saw you." Emma looked up at her mother with hopeful eyes. "Can I wait just a little longer, Mama? Maybe something else will happen." Carlos checked his watch. They had been at the palace for over an hour, and they had planned to visit other places in London that day. But he could see how important this moment was to his daughter. Sometimes the most meaningful experiences couldn't be planned or scheduled. "5 more minutes," Carlos said. "Then we need to move on." Emma nodded and turned back to face the guard. She didn't make any more signs. She simply stood quietly, showing the same kind of respectful attention that she would give to a teacher or a priest. She wanted to honor the guard's concentration and discipline. The guard continued to stand perfectly straight, his eyes focused on the distance beyond the crowd. His red uniform remained spotless, his rifle held at the exact correct angle. To most observers, he looked exactly the same as he had all morning, like a perfectly trained soldier doing his duty without any awareness of the tourists around him. But Emma was watching more carefully than most people. She had been studying this guard for almost half an hour now, and she had learned to notice very small details. She could see the tiny rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. She could see how his fingers held his rifle with just the right amount of pressure, firm enough to maintain control, but not so tight that his hands would get tired. And then Emma noticed something that made her heart skip with excitement. The guard's left hand, which hung straight at his side in perfect military position, began to move in the smallest possible way. It was so subtle that Emma almost missed it. His fingers, which had been perfectly straight and still, began to wiggle ever so slightly. Emma blinked hard to make sure she wasn't imagining things. She looked at the guard's hand again, and yes, his fingers were definitely moving. Not in a big, obvious way that would get him in trouble with his commanders, but in a tiny, secret way that only someone watching very carefully would notice. Emma's eyes grew wide as she realized what the guard was doing. In British Sign Language, a small wiggling of the fingers at one side meant "I see you" or "I acknowledge you." The guard was answering her signs. He was telling her in the most careful and subtle way possible that he had received her message of respect and friendship. Emma's face broke into the biggest smile she had ever smiled. She pressed her hands to her mouth to keep from making any noise that might disturb the guard or draw attention to what he was doing, but inside her heart was singing with joy. The guard's finger wiggling lasted only about 3 seconds. Then his hand returned to its perfectly still military position. His face showed no expression at all and his eyes remained focused on the distance. To anyone who hadn't been watching carefully, nothing had happened at all. But Emma had seen it. The guard had broken his rigid protocol just enough to send her a secret message. He had risked getting in trouble to let a 7-year-old girl know that her kindness had been noticed and appreciated. Emma looked around at the crowd of tourists surrounding her. Most of them were still taking pictures and talking loudly. They had no idea that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. A palace guard had actually communicated with a tourist, something that was supposed to be impossible. Emma's mother had been filming with her phone and had caught the guard's subtle finger movement. "Did you see that, Carlos?" Maria whispered to her husband in Spanish. "Did his hand just move?" Carlos looked at the recording on his wife's phone. Even he had to watch it twice to see the tiny gesture. "Incredible," he whispered back. The guard actually responded to Emma. Emma turned to her parents with tears of happiness in her eyes. "He said, 'I see you' to me, Mama." He answered my signs. Several people in the crowd had noticed Emma's emotional reaction, though most of them hadn't seen the guard's response. They could see that something special had happened to the little girl, and many of them started taking more pictures and videos. An elderly British woman who had been watching the whole interaction approached Emma's family. "Excuse me, dear," she said to Emma in a gentle voice. "I've been visiting this palace for 50 years and I've never seen anything like what just happened." "That guard acknowledged you, didn't he?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. He wiggled his fingers to say, "I see you" in sign language. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "How absolutely wonderful. You've just experienced something that very few people ever get to see. Those guards are trained never to break character, but you were so respectful and kind that he couldn't help but respond to you." Word of the guard's response began to spread through the crowd. People who had missed the actual finger wiggling were asking others to explain what had happened. Those who had seen it were describing it to those who hadn't. A teenage girl with a phone said to her friend, "Did you record that?" "The guard actually moved. He responded to the little girl." "No way," her friend replied. "They're not allowed to do that. You must have imagined it. I swear it happened." His fingers moved. "It was like he was signing back to her." Emma could hear people talking about what they had witnessed, and she felt proud that she had created such a special moment. But she also felt protective of the guard. She didn't want him to get in trouble for being kind to her. Emma looked back at the guard one more time. He continued to stand perfectly still, showing no sign that anything unusual had happened. But Emma thought she could see just a tiny hint of warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Emma put her hand over her heart one final time and gave the guard a small, respectful bow. It was her way of saying thank you for his kindness and goodbye until she could return to London someday. Then Emma took her parents' hands and said, "I'm ready to go now. I got what I came for." As they walked away from the palace, Emma could still hear people in the crowd talking about what they had witnessed. Some believed the guard had actually responded, while others insisted it was impossible. But Emma knew the truth. She had successfully communicated with the palace guard, and he had answered her in the most beautiful and secret way possible. The memory of those wiggling fingers would stay with Emma for the rest of her life. As Emma walked away from the palace with her parents, the full weight of what had just happened began to hit her. The tears that had been gathering in her eyes since the guard's finger wiggle finally spilled over, running down her cheeks in streams of pure joy and wonder. Emma wasn't crying because she was sad. She was crying because her heart felt so full of happiness that it seemed too big for her small body to contain. She had hoped the guard might notice her respectful attempts to communicate, but she had never imagined he would actually respond to her. "Emma, mi amor, what's wrong?" Maria asked, immediately concerned when she saw her daughter's tears. "Nothing is wrong, Mama," Emma said between happy sobs. "Everything is perfect. The guard saw me, He really saw me. Carlos knelt down and gathered his daughter into a big hug. I'm so proud of you, Emma. What you did back there was very special. Why is it so special, Papa? Emma asked, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Carlos thought about how to explain it in a way his 7-year-old daughter would understand. Emma, that guard's job is to be like a statue. He's not supposed to move or talk or show any feelings at all, but your kindness was so genuine and so respectful that he couldn't help but respond to you. He risked getting in trouble just to let you know that he appreciated what you were doing. Emma's tears started flowing again as she understood the true significance of the guard's action. He had put himself at risk just to acknowledge her. That meant her message of respect and friendship had been not just received but deeply felt. Maria sat down on a nearby bench and pulled Emma onto her lap. Tell me what you're feeling right now, mi amor. Emma leaned against her mother's chest and tried to put her overwhelming emotions into words. I feel like magic happened, Mama. Like when you read me fairy tales, but this was real. The guard and I talked to each other without making any sound. And he understood that I think he's brave and important. That is exactly what happened, Maria said, stroking Emma's hair. You created your own little miracle today. Emma looked back toward the palace where she could still see the red figure of the guard in the distance. Do you think he knows how happy he made me? I think he does, Carlos said. I think that's why he did it. He could see in your face how much you respected him, and he wanted to give you something special to remember. As the family sat on the bench, other tourists began to approach them. Word was spreading quickly through the crowd about the little girl who had talked to a palace guard and received a response. Several people wanted to hear the story directly from Emma. A family from Germany approached first. The father spoke careful English to Carlos. Excuse me, we heard that your daughter communicated with the guard. Is this true? Carlos looked at Emma, who nodded shyly. Yes, she used sign language to say hello and thank you to him. And he responded. That is incredible, the German mother said. We have been trying to get our son to understand that the guards are real people doing a serious job, not just decorations for pictures. Your daughter showed him the perfect example of how to be respectful. The German boy, who looked about Emma's age, came forward and said in English, Thank you for showing me the right way to act here. I want to learn sign language too. Emma wiped her eyes and smiled at the boy. It's not hard to learn. My cousin taught me. You just have to practice. More families gathered around, and Emma found herself telling her story over and over again. Each time she told it, she felt the magic of the moment all over again. She described how she had watched the guard for a long time, how she had practiced the signs, and how the guard had wiggled his fingers to say, I see you, back to her. An elderly American couple listened to Emma's story with wonder. Honey, the woman said to her husband, in all our travels around the world, I've never heard of anything like this happening. That little girl has something special about her, the man replied. She saw past the uniform to the person underneath. A British family with 3 children was particularly interested in Emma's experience. My children come here often, the mother told Emma's parents, but they never really understood what the guards do. Hearing your daughter's story has taught them so much about respect and empathy. Emma felt proud that her interaction with the guard was helping other children understand how to be more respectful tourists. She hadn't intended to teach anyone anything. She had just wanted to be kind to someone who seemed lonely. But she was happy that her actions were having a positive effect on others. As more people gathered to hear Emma's story, Maria started to worry about all the attention her daughter was receiving. Emma was naturally shy, and Maria could see that she was getting overwhelmed by all the questions and praise from strangers. Maybe we should continue our sightseeing now, Maria suggested to Carlos. Emma has had enough excitement for one morning. But before they could leave, a man in an official-looking uniform approached their group. Emma's parents tensed up, worried that they might be in trouble for causing a disturbance at the palace. Excuse me, the man said politely. I'm Sergeant Davies from the palace security team. I understand there was an interaction between your daughter and one of our guards. Carlos stepped protectively in front of Emma. Yes, sir. But my daughter was very respectful. She didn't cause any trouble or interfere with the guard's duties. Sergeant Davies smiled warmly. Oh, you're not in any trouble at all. Quite the opposite, actually. I wanted to personally thank your daughter for her remarkable behavior today. Emma peeked out from behind her father, curious about what the official wanted to say. Young lady, Sergeant Davies said, addressing Emma directly. "What you did today was extraordinary. In my 20 years of working at this palace, I have never seen a tourist show such genuine respect and understanding for what our guards do. You turned what could have been just another tourist photo opportunity into a moment of real human connection." Emma felt her cheeks turn red with embarrassment, but also with pride. "I just wanted him to know that someone appreciated his hard work," she said quietly. "And he did appreciate it," Sergeant Davies replied. "The guard you communicated with is Guardsman Williams, and he asked me to tell you that your kindness made his entire week. He said he's never had anyone try to communicate with him so respectfully." Emma's eyes grew wide. "He talked about me?" "He certainly did. After his shift ended, he came to find me specifically to tell me about the polite little girl who used sign language to say hello and thank you. He was very moved by your gesture." Emma felt her heart fill up with happiness all over again. Not only had the guard noticed her communication, but he had been so touched by it that he had talked about her to his supervisor. She had made a real impact on someone's day, maybe even someone's life. Sergeant Davies continued, "Guardsman Williams wanted me to give you this." He handed Emma a small pin in the shape of the royal crown. "This is an official palace pin that we give to very special visitors. He wanted you to have it as a thank you for your respectful behavior and as a reminder of your unique experience here today." Emma took the pin with trembling hands. It was beautiful, with tiny crystals that sparkled in the London sunlight. She had never received such an important gift from a stranger, especially not from someone as official as a palace guard. "Will you tell Guardsman Williams thank you from me?" Emma asked. "And tell him that I think he's the best guard in the whole palace?" "I certainly will," Sergeant Davies said with a big smile. "And Emma, I hope you'll come back to visit us again someday. We need more tourists like you." As Sergeant Davies walked away, Emma clutched her royal pin and felt the full impact of what had happened to her that morning. She had come to London hoping to see the famous palace guards. Instead, she had created a memory that would last forever and touched the heart of a real palace guard in the process. By the time Sergeant Davies had finished talking to Emma and her family, a considerable crowd had gathered around them. What had started as a few curious tourists had grown into a group of more than 50 people, all eager to hear about the little girl who had successfully communicated with a palace guard. Emma found herself at the center of attention in a way she had never experienced before. People were taking pictures of her holding the royal pin that Guardsman Williams had given her. Others were asking her to demonstrate the sign language she had used. Some were simply staring at her with amazement, as if she had performed some kind of magic trick. "Emma, show us how you signed hello to the guard," called out a woman with an American accent who was holding up her phone to record. Emma felt shy with so many people watching her, but she also felt proud of what she had accomplished. She raised her hand and demonstrated the gentle wave she had used to greet Guardsman Williams. The crowd watched with fascination as if they were learning something very important. "And the sign for thank you?" asked a teenager who seemed genuinely interested in learning. Emma touched her fingers to her lips and then moved her hand forward, just as she had done for the guard. Several people in the crowd tried to copy her movements, practicing the sign language gesture. A tour guide who had been leading a group of Japanese tourists approached Emma's parents. "Excuse me, would it be possible for your daughter to speak to my tour group? They are very interested in her story, and I think it would help them understand the proper way to appreciate the guards." Maria looked at Emma, who nodded eagerly. Despite her natural shyness, Emma was discovering that she enjoyed sharing her experience with others. She liked knowing that her story was helping people understand how to be more respectful tourists. The Japanese tourists gathered in a semicircle around Emma, listening intently as their guide translated her story into Japanese. Emma could see their faces light up with understanding as they learned about her patient observation of the guard and her respectful approach to communication. One elderly Japanese woman approached Emma after hearing the story and bowed deeply to her. Through the translator, she said, "In Japan, we understand the importance of showing respect to people who serve others. This little girl has shown great wisdom and honor today." Emma bowed back to the woman, remembering what she had learned about Japanese culture in school. The woman smiled widely and took a photo with Emma, both of them bowing politely to each other. British family with 2 young sons had been listening to all the conversations around Emma. The mother approached Carlos and Maria. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but your daughter has just taught my boys a lesson that I've been trying to teach them for years. They've always treated the guards like toys or statues. Now they understand that these are real people deserving of respect. The two boys, who looked about 8 and 10 years old, came up to Emma. Can you teach us the signs you used? The older boy asked. We want to be respectful like you were. Emma spent several minutes teaching the boys the basic signs for hello, thank you, and friend. She showed them how to make the movement small and respectful, not big and attention-seeking. The boys practiced seriously, understanding that they were learning something important. Remember, Emma told them, the guards can't always respond to you, but they can see what you're doing, and they appreciate it when people are kind and respectful. A woman who introduced herself as a reporter for a local London newspaper had been taking notes and photos throughout the gathering. She approached Emma's family with professional interest. I'd love to write a story about what happened here today, the reporter said to Carlos and Maria. This is exactly the kind of positive news story that people need to hear. Would you be comfortable with that? Carlos and Maria looked at each other uncertainly. They hadn't expected their family vacation to turn into a news story, but they could see how much Emma's experience had touched people and how it was encouraging others to be more respectful and empathetic. What do you think, Emma? Maria asked her daughter. Would you like to tell your story to more people? Emma thought about it carefully. If it helps other people understand that the guards are real people with feelings, then yes, I want to help them understand. The reporter smiled and knelt down to Emma's level. Can you tell me why you decided to use sign language instead of just calling out to the guard like other tourists do? Emma's answer was simple but profound. Because I thought he might be lonely, and I wanted to talk to him in a way that wouldn't get him in trouble or disturb his important work. Several people in the crowd who heard Emma's answer exchanged meaningful looks. In just a few words, the 7-year-old had explained the difference between selfish tourist behavior and genuine empathy. A man who introduced himself as a teacher from a nearby London school had been listening to Emma's story with great interest. Young lady, he said to Emma, would you and your parents consider visiting my school to tell your story to my students? I think they could learn a great deal from your example. Before Emma could answer, other people in the crowd began making similar requests. A youth group leader wanted Emma to speak to a group of teenagers about respect and empathy. A woman from a community center wanted to invite Emma to teach sign language basics to children. A man from a tourism board wanted to use Emma's story to promote respectful tourism in London. Emma felt overwhelmed by all the requests and attention. She looked up at her parents with wide eyes, not sure how to respond to so much interest from strangers. Carlos recognized that his daughter was getting tired from all the attention. We appreciate all your interest, he announced to the crowd, but we're on vacation, and Emma needs some time to rest and enjoy London like a normal tourist. The crowd began to disperse, but not before many people approached Emma to shake her hand, take photos with her, or simply tell her how much her story had touched them. Emma received business cards from several people who wanted to stay in touch and possibly arrange future visits or speaking opportunities. An elderly British gentleman who had been quietly watching the entire scene approached Emma as the crowd was breaking up. Young lady, he said in a distinguished accent, I served as a guard at this palace 40 years ago. What you did today honored not just Guardsman Williams but all of us who have ever stood guard here. Thank you for seeing us as people, not just tourist attractions. Emma felt tears coming to her eyes again as she realized that her simple act of kindness had meant something to guards from past and present. She had started the morning just wanting to see the famous palace guards, and now she was being thanked by someone who had actually been one of those guards decades ago. As Emma and her family finally began to walk away from the palace for the second time that day, Emma could hear people still talking about what they had witnessed. Groups of tourists were practicing the sign language gestures she had taught them. Parents were explaining to their children why Emma's behavior had been so special. Tour guides were incorporating Emma's story into their presentations. About the palace guards, Emma had unknowingly started a small movement toward more respectful and empathetic tourism at one of London's most famous attractions. Her simple desire to connect with another human being had rippled outward to touch dozens of people and would likely influence how they interacted with service workers and guards for years to come. As they walked through the park away from the palace, Emma looked back one more time at the distant red figure of Guardsman Williams, still standing at his post. She waved goodbye with a small, respectful gesture, even though she knew he couldn't wave back. But she also knew that somewhere inside that serious, still exterior, he was smiling at the memory of the little girl from Spain who had seen him as a person and taken the time to say hello in the most beautiful way possible. That evening, back in their small London hotel room, Emma was sitting on the bed carefully examining the royal pin that Guardsman Williams had given her. She had pinned it to her favorite sweater and kept touching it to make sure it was real. The whole day felt like a wonderful dream that she didn't want to forget. Maria was scrolling through the photos and videos she had taken on her phone, trying to choose the best ones to send to family back in Spain. As she watched the video of Emma signing to the guard and his subtle finger response, she felt emotional all over again. "Carlos, look at this," Maria said to her husband, who was sitting at the small hotel desk writing in their travel journal. This video really captured what happened today. You can see Emma being so respectful, and if you look very carefully, you can see the guard's response. Carlos came over to look at the phone screen. Even knowing what to look for, he had to watch the video twice to catch the guard's tiny finger wiggle. "It's amazing that you caught that moment, Maria. Emma will treasure this video when she's older." Emma looked up from her pin. "Mama, can we send the video to Cousin Sophia? I want to show her how I use the sign language she taught me." Maria smiled. "Of course, mi amor. Sophia will be so proud of you." As Maria was preparing to send the video to family members, she had an idea. "Emma, would it be okay if I shared this video with other people too? I think many people would enjoy seeing such a kind and respectful interaction." Emma thought about all the people at the palace who had been interested in her story. Will it help other people understand how to be nice to the guards? "I think it will," Maria replied. "Then yes. Mama, share it with everyone." Maria decided to post the video on her social media accounts with a simple caption in both Spanish and English. "My daughter Emma used sign language to respectfully greet a palace guard in London." His response brought tears to our eyes. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the most beautiful moments. Maria sent the video to Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. She tagged it with locations and hashtags like Congar London, or Buckingham Palace, sign language, kindness, respect. Then she put her phone away and helped Emma get ready for bed. None of them expected what would happen next. By the time the Martinez family woke up the next morning, Maria's phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. The video of Emma and the palace guard had been shared hundreds of times overnight. People were commenting, liking, and sharing it with their own friends and family. "Carlos, look at this," Maria said, staring at her phone in amazement. "The video has been shared over 1,000 times, and it's only been online for 12 hours. Emma was brushing her teeth in the small hotel bathroom when she heard her parents talking excitedly in Spanish. She came out with toothpaste still around her mouth. "What's happening, Mama?" "Your video is becoming very popular online, Emma. Lots of people are watching it and sharing it with their friends." Throughout that day, as the Martinez family continued their London vacation, visiting the Tower of London and riding the London Eye, the video continued to spread across social media platforms. People were sharing it not just in Spain and England, but all around the world. The video was being shared with captions in different languages. "This little girl shows us how to be respectful tourists. Sign language bridges hearts across cultures. A lesson in empathy from a 7-year-old. And this is how we should treat people in service positions." By the evening of their second day in London, the video had been viewed over 100,000 times. News websites began picking up the story. The first article appeared on a British tourism blog with the headline, "Spanish Girl's Respectful Greeting to Palace Guard Touches Hearts Worldwide." Emma's story was being shared on parenting blogs, sign language education sites, and tourism websites. People were using her video to teach children about empathy and respect. Sign language instructors were using it to show how signing could create meaningful connections. The comments on the video were overwhelmingly positive. "This little girl has more class than most adults. As a former military guard myself, I can tell you how much respectful gestures like this mean to us. I'm a sign language interpreter, and this beautiful interaction brought tears to my eyes. This is exactly how we should teach our children to interact with people who serve the public." Planning a trip to London and will definitely remember this girl's example when visiting the Palace on their third day in London. Maria's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. When she answered, she was surprised to hear someone speaking English with a British accent. "Hello, is this the mother of the young girl who signed to the Palace Guard? This is Sarah Mitchell from BBC London. We'd love to do a news story about your daughter's experience." Maria was shocked. The BBC wanted to interview Emma. She explained that they were tourists from Spain and would be flying home the next day. "Would it be possible to do a brief interview this afternoon?" Sarah asked. This story has really captured people's imagination, and we think it represents something important about kindness and cultural understanding. After discussing it with Carlos and Emma, they agreed to meet the BBC reporter at a cafe near their hotel. Emma was nervous but excited about being on television. The interview lasted about 15 minutes. Sarah Mitchell asked Emma simple questions about why she decided to use sign language and how she felt when the guard responded. Emma's answers were honest and heartfelt. "I thought the guard looked lonely, and I wanted him to know that someone saw him as a real person, not just a decoration. When he wiggled his fingers back at me, I felt so happy because it meant he understood that I was trying to be kind. I hope other children will learn sign language so they can talk to people who can't hear, like my cousin Sophia." The BBC segment aired that evening on the local London news and was also posted online. This brought even more attention to Emma's story. International news outlets began picking up the story, and the video was shared on news websites in dozens of countries. Back in Spain, Emma's school friends and teachers saw her on the news. Her cousin Sophia was especially proud to see Emma using sign language and explaining how Sophia had taught her the basic signs. The viral spread of Emma's video led to unexpected connections. Deaf communities around the world shared the video as an example of how sign language could create bridges between hearing and deaf people. Tourism boards began using Emma's story to promote respectful travel behavior. Several organizations reached out to the Martinez family with invitations. A sign language school in Madrid wanted Emma to visit and meet other children learning to sign. A tourism education program wanted to create materials based on Emma's example. A children's book publisher inquired about writing a book about Emma's experience. Most surprisingly, Buckingham Palace itself issued a statement about the video. A palace spokesperson said, "We are delighted that this young visitor's respectful interaction with one of our guards has brought joy to so many people around the world. This is a wonderful example of how cultural exchange and mutual respect can create meaningful connections." By the time the Martinez family boarded their plane back to Spain, Emma's video had been viewed over 2 million times and shared in more than 30 countries. News articles about her story had been published in English, Spanish, French, German, Italian, Japanese, and many other languages. Emma didn't fully understand the scale of what had happened. She knew that many people had seen her video and that they liked her story. But she was still just a 7-year-old girl who was tired from her vacation and excited to sleep in her own bed. As the plane took off from London, Emma looked out the window at the city getting smaller below them. Somewhere down there, Guardsman Williams was probably standing at his post, still protecting the palace with the same dedication and professionalism as always. Emma smiled and made a small sign language gesture toward the window, the sign for "thank you" that had started everything. She was grateful for the magical experience she had shared with a palace guard, but she had no idea that their brief moment of connection was still spreading around the world, inspiring people to be more kind, more respectful, and more willing to see the humanity in everyone they meet. 6 months after Emma's magical encounter with Guardsman Williams at Buckingham Palace, life had settled back into a normal routine for the Martinez family in Madrid. Emma was back in school, where she had become something of a local celebrity among her classmates and teachers. But the ripple effects of her simple act of kindness were still spreading around the world in ways she couldn't have imagined. Emma was in her second-grade classroom one Tuesday morning, working on a math problem, when her teacher, Señora Rodriguez, approached her desk with a big smile and an official-looking envelope. "Emma, this came for you at the school office," Señora Rodriguez said. "It looks very important." Emma looked at the envelope with curiosity. It was thick cream-colored paper with gold trim, and her name was written in beautiful handwriting. The return address made her heart skip. "Buckingham Palace, London. Can I open it now?" Emma asked her teacher. "Of course. Let's see what the palace has sent you. Emma carefully opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a formal invitation written in both English and Spanish. As Emma read it, her eyes grew wider and wider. Her Majesty's Royal Household cordially invites Miss Emma Martinez and her family to attend a special ceremony recognizing acts of international friendship and cultural understanding. The ceremony will take place at Buckingham Palace on Saturday, May 15th, and will honor individuals who have promoted positive relationships between nations through personal acts of kindness and respect. Emma could hardly believe what she was reading. The palace wanted her to come back to London for a special ceremony. She was being honored for the simple sign language greeting she had given to Guardsman Williams. "Senora Rodriguez," Emma called out excitedly. "They want me to come back to the palace. They're going to give me an award." The whole classroom erupted in excitement as Emma's classmates gathered around to hear about the invitation. Senora Rodriguez helped Emma call her mother at the hospital where she worked to share the incredible news. Maria was so shocked she had to sit down in the hospital break room. "Emma, are you sure you read it correctly? The palace wants to honor you?" "Yes, Mama. And it says the whole family is invited. Can we go, please?" Maria promised to discuss it with Carlos when he got home from work, but in her heart she already knew they would find a way to make this trip happen. How could they deny Emma this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? That evening, the Martinez family sat around their dinner table planning their return trip to London. The invitation had included information about travel assistance for international guests, which would help with the costs. Emma was so excited she could barely eat her dinner. "Will I get to see Guardsman Williams again?" Emma asked. "I don't know, mi amor," Carlos replied, "but I'm sure if he's there, he'll be very happy to see you." The weeks leading up to the ceremony flew by quickly. Emma's story was featured again in local Spanish newspapers when word got out about the palace invitation. Her school organized a special assembly where Emma talked about the importance of being kind to people from different cultures and backgrounds. Emma's cousin Sophia helped her practice more advanced sign language phrases so she would be ready if she met any deaf people at the palace ceremony. Emma learned to sign, "It's nice to meet you. I'm from Spain, and thank you for this honor." Finally, the day arrived for the Martinez family to return to London. This time, they flew first class, a gift from the Spanish Tourism Board, which was proud to have one of their young citizens representing Spain at such a prestigious event. When they arrived at Buckingham Palace on the morning of the ceremony, Emma was amazed by how different everything looked. Instead of crowds of tourists taking pictures, there were elegant decorations and formally dressed officials guiding small groups of honored guests. Emma wore her best dress, a beautiful blue one that her grandmother had bought specially for the occasion. She had pinned the royal crown pin that Guardsman Williams had given her to the dress right over her heart. A palace official named Lady Margaret Thompson welcomed the Martinez family personally. "Miss Emma," she said, "we are so delighted to have you here today. Your act of kindness has inspired people all around the world." Emma was taken to a beautiful room inside the palace, where she met the other people being honored that day. There was an elderly man who had started a program to help refugees learn English, a woman who had created a scholarship program for international students, and several others who had built bridges between different cultures and countries. "You're the youngest person ever to receive this honor," Lady Thompson told Emma, "but age doesn't matter when it comes to making a positive impact on the world." As they waited for the ceremony to begin, Emma heard a familiar voice behind her. "Excuse me, is this the young lady who taught me that sign language could touch hearts?" Emma turned around and gasped. Standing there in a formal dress uniform, looking much more relaxed than when she had seen him on duty, was Guardsman Williams himself. "Mr. Williams," Emma exclaimed, then immediately made the sign for hello that had started their whole connection. Guardsman Williams, whose first name was James, smiled widely and signed back, "Hello, Emma. It's wonderful to see you again." Emma was amazed that he knew her name and that he had learned more sign language since their first meeting. James knelt down to Emma's level so they could talk more easily. "Emma, I wanted to thank you personally for what you did that day at the palace gates," James said. "Your respectful greeting reminded me why I love my job and why it's important to remember the human connections that make life meaningful." Emma felt tears of happiness forming in her eyes. "I'm so glad I got to see you again. I was hoping you would be here." I specifically requested to be part of today's ceremony, James said. I wanted to be here to honor you properly. James explained that since Emma's video had gone viral, the palace guards had noticed a significant change in how tourists treated them. More people were being respectful and considerate. Several visitors had even learned basic sign language specifically to communicate politely with the guards. You started something important, Emma, James said. You showed people that a little kindness and respect can create beautiful moments of connection. The ceremony itself was held in one of the palace's most magnificent rooms, with crystal chandeliers and paintings of former kings and queens on the walls. Emma sat in the front row with her parents, still hardly believing that she was inside the actual palace receiving an honor from the royal household. When Emma's name was called, she walked up to receive her award, a beautiful, crystal plaque with her name engraved on it and the words, "For promoting international friendship through acts of kindness and respect." As she accepted the award, Emma was asked to say a few words to the assembled guests. Standing at a podium with a microphone, looking out at all the formally dressed adults, Emma felt nervous but determined to share her message. "Thank you for this beautiful award," Emma said in careful English. "I just wanted to be nice to someone who was working hard to keep everyone safe. I learned from my cousin Sophia that when you can't talk with words, you can talk with your hands and your heart. I think all people deserve to be treated with kindness no matter what job they do or what country they come from." The audience applauded warmly, and Emma saw several people wiping their eyes. Her simple, heartfelt words had once again touched people's hearts. After the ceremony, Emma and her family were given a private tour of parts of the palace that regular tourists never get to see. They had tea with some of the other honorees and took pictures in rooms where kings and queens had lived for hundreds of years, but the most special moment came at the end of the day when James Williams met them at the palace gates, the same spot where Emma had first signed to him 6 months earlier. "Emma," James said, "I have something for you." He handed her a small wrapped package. Inside was a photograph of Emma making her sign language gesture to James that first day, taken by one of the security cameras. At the bottom, James had written in neat handwriting, "To Emma, thank you for reminding me that the most important part of my job is the human connections we make. Your friend, James Williams." Emma hugged the photograph to her chest. "I'll keep this forever," she promised. As the Martinez family prepared to leave London again, Emma looked back at the palace one more time. This time, she wasn't just a tourist taking pictures. She was an honored guest who had created a lasting friendship and inspired thousands of people around the world to be more kind and respectful to others. The story of Emma and James became a regular part of palace tour guides' presentations. A children's book was eventually written about their encounter, with proceeds going to organizations that teach sign language and promote cultural understanding. Most importantly, Emma's simple act of signing hello and thank you to a palace guard had created a ripple effect of kindness that continued to spread. Schools around the world used her story to teach children about empathy and respect. Tourism organizations used her example to promote respectful travel behavior. Sign language programs saw increased enrollment from people inspired by Emma's story. Years later, when Emma was older, she would look back on that day at Buckingham Palace as the moment she learned that small acts of